Hello, my name is Jay. I am your room host. All that means is I'm here to help you get oriented. And the way to get oriented first, I'd like to welcome you to our session A. This is Community Visioning for Restorative Practices, Breaking the School to Prison Pipeline. We will not be having your standard conference setup. Instead, our presenters have decided they'd like to do a little bit of a fishbowl. I will let our presenters give you the more substantive introduction. On that note, I will hand things over, and please introduce yourself, and away you go.
Also, can we say thank you to our amazing room hosts? They've been super helpful. Okay, so I'm standing because it's hard to see everybody. We're going to do a fishbowl, so we're going to be presenting from here. So we would love it if folks could face us. I think everyone is. We do have mics, but if you can't hear, just holler and we'll speak up. So I wanted to get that out of the way first. My name's Seema Samimi. My pronouns are they, them, and I am an assistant professor in social work at the University of Minnesota. I'm introducing myself, but they're going to introduce themselves in the fishbowl. Who has never seen a fishbowl before? Has no idea what we're doing? Okay, that's a significant amount of people. So how we're going to run this one today, and there's a little bit nuance, and you can change things. But what a fishbowl is people sit in the middle, and ideally everyone sits in a larger circle outside of them, and you observe and listen to the conversation that's happening here. And then we stop, we ask questions, as in y'all ask questions of the people in the circle, and at some point, we switch out. So someone who's in the circle will leave and take your seat, and you will come and sit in the circle in their place if you like. So I'm looking at a few key people who I know in here to volunteer if you can. I'm voluntolding you. So that's generally the way we'll do it, but I am saving the last 15 minutes for a general Q&A. So yeah, I should talk about our project maybe. So we're doing a project on community asset mapping in the Twin Cities with the goal of mapping assets for young people and to help support schools to keep kids in school and reduce exclusionary discipline. I'm looking at you because you had the beautiful, to see every child as sacred and to reimagine schools as centers of community. So yeah, that's what we're doing, and we're gonna just have a conversation about that. Thank you. So first question, y'all, is just tell us about you, who you are, and what brought you to this work.
Mic check, 1, 2. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Yang. I go by he, him pronouns. I work out of the Office of School Supports in St. Paul Public Schools with St. Paul. I've been with them for 15 plus years. This year, really supporting our office for the last 8 years with restorative practices in St. Paul Public Schools. It's my pleasure to be here with you all today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cara Beckman, she, her pronouns. I am a colleague of Seema's here at the University of Minnesota, and I feel like what brings me to this work is community. Having grown up in a small town where accountability and community and relationships were all the same thing with the same people, and absolutely this idea of your parents knew before you got home, and this, and that we were going to be accountable to each other because we were going to see each other at the grocery store and on the way home from school and at church, and so there was no hiding from accountability, and there was no belief that you could outsource discipline to people in some kind of weird position of authority and power because that maybe was your uncle or your grandparent. And so I know deeply what it is to grow up in that kind of community, and I don't think we're actually that far from it, but I think we've lost maybe some of the ability to see that possibility here in the Twin Cities and in some other places. And so reimagining what it means to capture some of that energy of community and just reconnect to that.
Hi, I'm Erin Sandsmark. I'm the programs manager for Solutions Not Suspensions Coalition. So that work of the coalition has been going on for about 10 years. I started here a couple years ago. The goal is that we are reducing and removing discriminatory discipline practices in the state of Minnesota. So that looks like legislative work, that looks like individual school district work, that looks like press conferences, that looks like community meetings. So we do a lot of work embedded in the community and at the Capitol, trying to get people to listen to us. And I came to this work as a teacher first. So I'm an art teacher by trade, and then moved my way into advocacy and saw so much difference between the school districts I was in, the school buildings I was in, and how children were being treated from teacher to teacher and school to school. So that's why I'm here, and I'm really happy and thankful to be invited by SEMA. So thanks.
Hey, good morning. Sean Davenport, he, him, his. I work for St. Paul Public Schools, the district-wide restorative practice coordinator. I've been in education for about 18 years, and at St. Paul for 11. We started the restorative practice program back in 2015, about 2015, 2016. I was a site lead at the time. And the reason I got into this work is just to build community and to create a safe environment for all of our students, to remove those assumptions and stereotypes that happen, especially in the inner city, and really just get to know the families, get to know the students, so they can have a safe experience in school.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry, we're rotating all kinds of mics in here. My name is Labiba Break, or just Biba is fine. I am a fourth-year PhD student at the University of Minnesota School of Social Work. My research interests are predominantly focused on BIPOC student mental health in universities, but the systems that bring us to those situations where we have those mental health struggles, especially for BIPOC children, begin very, very, very early on. I am a firm believer in the idea that it takes a village, but in today's day and age, we lack the village. And I think this type of work brings the village together into the school and outside of the school to help us raise our children. I'm a mother of 5, so partially influenced by all of that as well. And that's what brings me.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so anyone can go first. A question, what does community assets mean to you? How do you define community assets?
The community assets to me are the things that exist already that we might not be engaging with. Assets to the community are places that people are already going that maybe organizations like SNS might not know about, or places outside of that specific community might not be aware of. But there are assets that assist with growing mental and physical well-being of the community around them. It might look like tutoring after school. It might look like friends and family picking up extra kids after school to make sure that they get home safe without an after-school activity. I think there's a lot of things that community assets can be, and they're embedded in our communities, and they are everywhere, but are they connected well to each other? And are they connected well to a larger group where we know where they're at? That's, I think, that's what's coming to mind for me, but it's places that are doing the work and are interested in seeing community growth within the community and within spaces of trust and love, honestly.
Sorry. I had to drink a lot of water this morning. My coffee's still in my mouth. So I feel that for myself, I had the pleasure of being with multiple communities that really raised me as a person, as an individual, and as a 37-year-old born and raised here in Minnesota. And so for me, community means the people. for me, asset is individuals, as far as communities coming together, the shared wealth of knowledge, wisdom, experiences. And so for me, asset is not necessarily financial assets, but really looking at individuals as a community of numbers through strength. And so for myself, the way that I look at community assets, it's the people itself.
I can go next. Just turn on the one I have. I think I define assets in multiple different ways. There's, of course, the financial aspect, right? The way we live, our ability to live, affording our housing, affording our vehicles, credit, et cetera, all of these things. But the relationships are really important. The idea of being in community with others, like, is it? Oh, sorry. Being in community with others, the ability to send your children out and have them be out and safe in the community, whether they're buying something, they're hanging out, they're chatting with people in a safe way, and coming home maybe more knowledgeable than they left in some way, shape, or form, which kind of leads to the idea of the people in the community and the knowledges that they have that they impart on our community or our people, meaning my family directly. So it's broad. It's broad.
No, I agree with things that were already said. I mean, I think when I think about community asset, obviously the financial piece of that, but really it's around relationship, around those. Where's those? And I look at the school. I'm an educator, so I think about the school. What's around the school? Like, what's the closest churches? Where's those corner stores that the kids are running to? Is the barber shop over there? Where's the rec center? Thinking about all these spaces, the library, and so on, these spaces. And then those spaces that we may not even consider assets. You know, think about those spaces as well. Where are kids going to? Where's that party house? You know, what's that parent like? You know, they're allowing all these kids to come there, where they do, but they are in a safe space, but sometimes we're frowned on it. So who is that person? How do we get to know that person? How do we support that person in making that a more proactive space, positive space, I should say. So I think about all the spaces that our students, that our kids, our families go to, whether we feel productively or unproductively in the community.
Thanks. So I would love if y'all have stories to share or examples of where you have witnessed community working with schools specifically around disrupting carceral discipline or the school-to-prison pipeline.
Well, I tell this story all the time, so the people in this group probably tired of hearing it. But I think about, like I mentioned, I was a site lead first before I went to the district. And at the middle school I was at, students want to play fight. They always want to play fight. I mean, boys, middle school boys, they want to play fight. And, everything you touch, that's a suspension. Oh, that's a fight, that's a suspension. So there's a group of kids that kind of got smart. They went across the street and had some gloves and started boxing over there, and it's like, well, it's off school grounds, but people still like, no, they're fighting, they need to be suspended. So myself, Jim, and a couple others that aren't here was like, got together, was like, you know what, how we make this an activity where kids aren't getting suspended for doing this. And so we connected with the community. We had Sir Boxing, he's from the community, and we connected with him and started with this after-school program through our Flip Side program, and the students we started busing students over to his gym, real gym, and started to learn the box. Some kids fell off because a lot of work is not just fighting each other, there's a lot of exercise that go into that. But we really created a space with the community, and it's still going today. That happened 6 years ago. And now they're not just at that school, but they're at another middle school as well. And for kids to have another outlet. Everyone's not going to play basketball. Everyone's not going to be on a chess club. But anyone can try the box. And it's not always fighting another person. You're fighting yourself. You're working out. You're hitting the bag. And we have circles around that too, and have conversations around that. So, like I mentioned, that's one thing that we have done for sure.
I've got a couple of examples, but I'll start with one where I actually consider it an example of community modeling for schools, what new accountability processes could look like. So a community that I'm deeply connected to in the aftermath of George Floyd had some real racial harm happen on Facebook by a community leader who was deeply connected to the school because he actually had the corner store across the school where kids would walk after school, and then in the midst of what he claimed was a drunken, rage on Facebook, goes on to say racist, violent things publicly. And as you would imagine, the community quickly coalesced into run him out of town, or he is an upstanding citizen who made a mistake and we need to move on, right? So either forgive or run out of town. And then a couple of people were like, is there another option? Is there a different pathway? And he also, so not only does he have the corner store across the street, he provides a lot of pizza for free to the school, and he also happens to have a snow plowing business, and he has the contract to remove snow from the school every winter. And so there are multiple financial relationships between the school and the store owner, and lots of calls to cancel all contracts and essentially run them out of town, right? There was a plan in which people were trying to figure out somebody else to buy the business. And we ended up pulling together a community group, including the school superintendent, and beginning to talk about what accountability looks like and who actually holds accountability in this process. Like, is it truly all on him? Or is there an environment in this town that allows somebody like that to think that they can say this stuff on Facebook and get away with it? So what is the collective accountability that people hold? And also, what is the collective impact? People that came to that, we started talking about it in Circle, and they said, I'm embarrassed to say where I'm from because I know this is in the news right now. And so anyway, like through a 6-month process, there were multiple spaces in which he was invited to kind of show up and tell his story and talk and work through different pathways to make this right. The school did cancel contracts for the upcoming school year and put in place a process with him that through which he could earn that back. Community members, some people actually walked away from the process because they really did want to run him out of town. And other people engaged with him one-on-one and heard him say things like, people are walking into the store and saying, way to go, that was the best thing. I'm so glad you put that on Facebook. And I have decided that I'm going to say every time, no, it wasn't. What I said was not okay, and do one-on-one accountabilities to the people who think like me to say, it's not okay. And so I think for the school, we modeled and helped them see that there is a pathway to accountability that means learning and doing better and not doing it again, and having a public, and at least semi-public process that says this might be, it's similar to the conversation we're having in America today, right? This might be who we are, but it's not who we want to be, and it's not what we want to teach our children to be. And so there has to be a process by which we ask our adults to do better and bring them into that work, rather than saying if we just get rid of them, then we can say that he was the problem, rather than we are all the problem.
Could you just repeat the question one more time?
It was, do you have a story or an example of where you've seen community work with schools to disrupt the carceral discipline or the school-to-prison pipeline?
I'll share a story, just a very personal story, family story. Through the work of restorative practices in my journey, one of the big things for me is if I have a gift or a skill set and I can't contribute back to my own family and my own community, then what good is that gift? If I have a financial literacy and I have a skill set around teaching families, right, this skill, and I can't give it back, then I feel like I would be doing my community a disservice. And so upon stumbling and really doing the work of restorative practices within myself and in my experience of St. Paul Public Schools, really utilizing that to really bring that back to my family. And so we did some circle work. I share this story with my colleagues many, many times, but we had a circle. Last year we had a first family resource conference for our clan. I serve as the youth coordinator for my clan and my gang clan. And so we held a circle. And in that circle, there was 5 generations within that. From the youngest, who was 4 years old, attention span was really small, and to the oldest, who was 83. And so we navigated that space, and everybody in between that, we got a chance to talk about our names, talk about the things that we learned during that day of the resource or education conference, and then learned a little bit about the struggles that they are all going through, that each and every one of us in this room are going through. And so to hear a 4-year-old talk about his frustrations with his big brothers and sisters, and being able to share that openly with his parents and grandparents and multi-generations was really, really powerful, to be able to do their own storytelling. Many times in schools, we are told what our story is or what to believe to be true. But rarely do we actually give the mic to young people to tell their own stories and to come up with their own truth. And so in that circle, what we saw was the fear of our grandparents and our elders really not losing hope of our culture and our identity and who we were. And so what came out of that space, or that transformative space, was that we were able to advocate for our young people and also provide an opportunity for them, for their voice to be heard. And so out of that conference, a lot of our family members, wanted to learn more about the restorative practices process, and they actually stepped up to say, why isn't this happening in our schools and our districts? Because we want our schools to create stories and create narratives where students can feel safe, feel heard, and feel like they belong. And so not only is it happening in those parents reaching out for those advocacies or tools, but not only in St. Paul, but all throughout the state of Minnesota here. So I want to use that as an opportunity, even though it started very locally within my own personal family, it's expanding out to hold not only each other accountable, but schools and institutions accountable as well.
Thank you for sharing that, by the way. So SNS, Solutions Not Suspensions, has been doing, over the past year especially, a lot of work around policing in schools in general. We were named through the legislature to be part of a coalition or work group to create a policy through the state of Minnesota for school resource officers. Our stance as a coalition is that we want to see less police. We want to see the removal of policing in schools in general. However, it exists still. So we're trying to do what we can through our hotline, our individual outreach with parents and students to reduce policing in schools in general. But I just want to, so a specific story, this just happened. So this is an example of why the school to prison pipeline is just so prevalent in what we're seeing. So there was a student, a mom approached me through some other coalition members, and I was introduced to her, and her son was arrested at his high school, end of September, for an incident that happened outside of the school building. Okay, so we have a situation here in the state of Minnesota and around the country too, where we have police that go into schools to question children, without always proper warrants, more just, hey, do you know this kid? Oh, you know this kid? I'm gonna go, it's a wrapped audience, a child has to be at school. So it's an easy way for police to interrogate and to arrest a child outside of their home and away from their parents. So this child has been unable to go home since September 30th. He has been in juvenile detention since this incident, for an incident that happened outside of the school building. And I just was able to meet with the principal, the assistant principal, all these men, and then me and a mom that were talking to them about a suspension that he got put on his record on the same day of the arrest, saying things in the statement that were not true and not found in the police report. So he has an added suspension onto his record. SNS cannot do a ton when it comes to the legal, boundaries of like what the lawyer is able to do and all that advocacy. We can do a little bit. We can try to get people in the right spaces, try to advocate for certain groups to be supports. But what I could do is try to get that suspension taken off his record. We don't know if it's gonna work yet. This meeting just happened on Friday. But when we disclosed to we found out that the principal, no one had actually seen what this child was charged for on that suspension. He was charged with having basically an empty bullet casing in his backpack, and then that was called a weapon on his person, and therefore an immediate suspension and likelihood of expulsion. But that was on the police report. It wasn't founded to be true, basically. And the principal was very cautious about the idea of taking the suspension off. This child is incarcerated. He is not a threat to the school community at all, but yet there is still this need to put an extra barrier. And a suspension on his record could allow this child to be tried as an adult. He is 17 years old. These are things about his record that are showing his, his history being a troublemaker, violent, all these things that really aren't founded to be the person that he is, but his record will be looked at by the court, and he will be determined whether he's tried as an adult or as a child, and if he gets probation or many years in prison. So that's an example of not so much that we've done something to prevent the school to prison pipeline in that instance, but it's a clear example of how these things play out. And our role at SNS is, we go to these meetings. I do personally, but we have a large community network that goes and helps parents when we can. But the main thing is these suspensions, expulsions, and things in children's records have long-term implications for how they are treated in the criminal justice system. And one suspension, even at as young as what we could do, before the law passed out, you can't suspend a child below 3rd grade now. But when we get a 5-year-old, 6-year-old suspended, the likelihood of being incarcerated goes up exponentially because of that record and the push out of the education that they deserve and have the civil right to have. So that's just something that your question brought to mind. It's not like a fix, but it's just to want to share that example. Yeah.
Just real quick, you made me think about other communities. It's all about relationships, like I mentioned before. And I think about what's the community? What is the community? You mentioned law enforcement. Law enforcement is part of the community. In some communities, law enforcement is loved and praised, and they're doing TikTok dances with kids, and they're hanging out and doing all those things. I didn't really get that experience growing up in Chicago or growing up in South Minneapolis when I was there. I didn't get that experience. But I'm wondering, why do our inner city kids not be able to get that experience? So instead of banning police and being all that, I want to be proactive. I want our cops to see our kids as kids. And so what we've been doing is partnering with the Sheriff's Department with bringing sheriffs in, and sheriffs that look like the community as well, and that's from the community, that is playing basketball with the kids, playing soccer with the kids, foosball with the kids. We had a big, or still is kind of, but it's dying out, thankfully, but we had this big issue between races, this divide between our Korean and our African American students, and we brought in some sheriffs into that high school with our support. And our sheriffs was more calm than our intervention specialists. As we did the fishbowl, they were like kind of policing us, and we're looking like, well, we got this big cop right here. What are you doing? And so Jim called it out. I was like, hey, can you guys gonna be in a room? Can you come in a circle? And after that day, some things went wild, and it wasn't with the students, it was with the adults, and not the sheriffs. And so Jim and I had a conversation with those individuals separately, a circle. The sheriff and the principal took the students the next day to get pizza. After that, they started playing different sports together and then come in and meet in a circle with us. And by the end of the school year, students were talking about, oh man, it's dry here, man. It ain't, it's boring here. It ain't nothing popping here no more. And it's like, whoa, just in a few months. And they went from calling the sheriffs the ops to being cool with them. And that's what we really need in our community. So then when they see our students in the community, or when they get reports on our kids, or they have to come to that certain school, they're not coming with guns blazing, because they know the kids in that school. They know the toughest kids in that school, and they're building relationships with those kids, and those kids aren't scared of them either. That's what we need to get to. I don't know why we're like trying to divide people, but we need to, if we're really talking about that school, the prison pipeline, because in the school they act the same way. We're upset with law enforcement when we see the George Floyd thing, but you created that by kicking that kid out of school, what you just said in second grade. Second grade, you let them know that they don't belong. So you're not very much different. You're just doing it in a different way. So how do we start to be proactive and really get to know our students, get to know our families, and allow the law enforcement to really get to know them as human beings? And that's what we're trying to do. And also, with the attorney's office, bringing them in, because they do get our kids. They do see, we did have a situation where a kid was on papers for like 3 months and didn't get touched, and he was getting nervous. We had an RP person in that building and was able to reach out to someone, and they were able to figure that out, because they have like the diversion program, but they also have restorative justice program within that space. And so now we're trying to figure out how can we work together with our students. So just because sometimes other parents are calling, sometimes someone in the neighborhood is calling. So how do we work together on our students to do what's best for our kids in those spaces? So how are we bringing in all phases of the community, whether you like them or not, the law, school, religion, whatever, bring them all into the space, and let's have conversations to do what's best for our kids.
And I would just double down on that by saying, and circle back by saying, the biggest assets in our community are the people who love children and who see children as children. And we need that lens, we need those people. And so similarly, right, in 2020, when school boards were talking about ending contracts with police, it was like, that's a beautiful kind of positional statement, maybe. But what we really want is to figure out how to end the policing of our children, not to get police out of schools. So who is, to stop the policing of Black and brown bodies in a way that says you don't belong here, with that behavior that is a communication of the needs that we have intentionally inflicted upon you through our societal choices. And so, and there was story after story of SROs who showed up in a community with care and concern and belief in children that the community did not want to lose. And of course, there was story after story of SROs who showed up with a carceral logic. And we all know there are teachers that show up with that carceral logic, and there are teachers that show up with care and concern. And so it is not about the uniform that they are wearing, it is about the mindset with which they are showing up. And how do we actually tackle that and get right? And so all of these examples, but I think ultimately that's part of what we're trying to build with this project is a better sense of who in this community, who within walking distance of this school are the people who see children as children and parents as neighbors and all the other places that just want to reclaim the humanity of neighborhoods and community to build this possibility that we all see, because it's, we can talk about the struggles of sustainability of the diversion program, of the RP and SPPS program, of if we approach this through programs and through that just becomes the hustle, right? The hustle of sustainability of programs versus the the pivot towards a flow of saying, this is like, let's just find the people who see our children in the way that we need our children to be seen, who see our parents and our neighbors and our community in that way, and connect and connect and connect and reconnect and find the piece that you can fulfill when we need this for our children, and that kind of thing. So,
I'm just gonna add. Before I switch out with somebody, I'm just going to throw that out there. I am going to switch out with someone. I actually want to do an activity. Stand up if you have, in theory, patience for children. Now, keep on standing in practice if you have patience for children. In practice. Okay, you may sit. Question. Now, stand up if in theory you have patience for adults. Now, keep on standing if in practice you have patience for adults. Thank you. You may take a seat. So the reason why I bring that up, we were within high school navigating through some questions and a survey around restorative practices at this particular high school. And the adults, educators in that space said, there are two different restorative practices that are happening in our building. One for young people, which is loving, supportive, forgiving. And then there is this level of restorative practices that adults and educators are experiencing that is very opposite. Blame, shame, guilt, of navigating through how they show up or don't show up for young people. And so going back to what Cara had mentioned, right, this level of support that we give to young people. And so the same young, right, the nurturing level of support that we give to young people, we all still have this inner child within ourselves that we still feed. And within each and every one of you, there is this nurturing, because I will make mistakes every single day. And I know I will. But through my relationships, I can hold myself accountable through other people, through my community, and through my actions. The question is, do we give each other that level of grace for us to navigate through those? And in this line of work, I got into education to work with young people. Never, ever did I imagine myself providing coaching, professional development for educators. If you told me that when I was in my early 20s, I would run away. Why am I spending this time to work on adult mindsets when my passion was to work with young people? And so I lean into this conversation of, right, in order for us to really move through community and transformative change, we have to embrace all of our relationships with not only just young people, because it's convenient and that's what we're called to do, but we have to do that with the adults as well. And I would say that one of our biggest struggles is working with adult mindsets and changing, because they are the ones in direct contact with young people every single day. And so if we can't even help each other out in that way, to see everybody in this room, all of the adults, one of the biggest things that I saw in this conference, and one of the things that I will add into a debrief, is the conversation of we're missing young people here at this conference. Right? We're making all of these decisions for young people, and we don't have the young people here. We talk about transformative reimagining justice, and is it justice for adults? For just only adults, or is it justice for our whole community? And if that's the case, then how do we get communities, young people, and all stakeholders present so that we can collectively make those changes together?
Y'all see why I have Jim here? Yeah, okay. So if you're feeling some fire right now, it's time to come take the seat. Oh, we got an eager volunteer. Excellent. You want to tell us a little bit about who you are?
I am a young person. Hello. My name is Brittany. I'm a Master's of Social Work student at St. Mary's University. I intern at Lighthouse Child and Family Services. It is a day treatment program for children that have undergone trauma. And I found that, as a young person, I'm very excited to be here. I'm very excited to learn from you all. And I don't get the chance to speak very much, so I'm a little nervous. But I also find that, when I do try to stand up and advocate, especially for children, I am not heard. And it's because generally people look at me as a child. I am very young, I'm still in school, I'm still learning. But our young voices aren't heard by the older population. So my question to all of you is how can we open up our mindset and listen to more of what the children are needing? So an example that I have is I was just a part of an IEP meeting last week for a kiddo, individual education plan. I was in one of the first ones I've ever been to. And he's not in mainstream school. I believe he's going to Rum River, which is a level 4 school. More intensive behaviors for those of you that don't know. And he has expressed in individual therapy and in our day treatment group setting that he wants to get back into mainstream. And the teachers, while they're not necessarily opposed to this, don't want him to transition into the mainstream school until he has graduated from our program. So our concern then as a program is where he's going to stop receiving these services and resources, go into this new setting where he doesn't know anybody, he doesn't have a therapist there, he doesn't know anybody, and he doesn't have these resources now. So how are we setting him up for success when we're taking his resources? That's really broad.
Thank you, Brittany, for your enthusiasm and for bringing a real life, concrete thing for us to discuss. So I think we'll have anybody else want to come in the circle before anybody have a response to Brittany's question that they'd like to share? Oh. What if we just made it bigger and you were stuck in here? Okay.
Another young person. So I actually moved here from Duluth recently, like a couple months ago. I lived there for like 10 years. I worked in behavioral mental health up in Duluth for about 8 years. I actually worked at multiple different residential treatment programs that also did day treatment and other services in Duluth, one of them being Northwood Children's Services, where the unique thing about them is that in Duluth, at every single school, they have a Northwood satellite site for that reason. So, for example, like at all of the elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, whatever, they have like a site where they have a couple different therapists that do like day treatment groups, group therapy, individual therapy, even a space for that, like let's say in class, they're like overstimulated or having some behavior issues. I remember even at one point at an elementary school that I was working at doing school social work for my internship before I even knew what Northwoods was, there was a kid who in class, I don't know exactly what happened, but basically they had to evacuate all the other kids out of class. He flipped a desk, did all this stuff. The Northwood staff went in to intervene rather than like calling the cops or doing anything like that. Which was super cool, which basically moral of the story is like, I don't know, as like an organization, if this is too big of a question, but it'd be cool if down here in the cities, I don't know if anybody necessarily does that, but if they had satellite sites of programs like yours within the schools, so that it's not to say that you have to go to like a higher level school for care or whatever, or it'd be really cool to just have like an easier transition or even like a middle ground before a kid needs to leave that public school to go to these places. But yeah, and it's just a cool resource, and then even after school doing more like after-school programming and stuff. Even Northwoods, I can think of too. They during the summertime would like take the kids to the beach and do like different activities and stuff. But yeah, so I mean, I don't really know what the resources are because I just moved to the cities and whatever. But I guess your story just reminds me of the schools that I worked in Duluth, and specifically working at Northwoods. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Does anyone in the circle have, I think Brittany's question, if I'm going to paraphrase, is how do you or your place of internship set up a kid for success and meet what they are advocating for themselves when there's no resources there in what they're asking for? Is that kind of what you're asking? Okay. Anybody have any ideas here? I have ideas, but I don't.
So you said you were at an IEP meeting, right?
Yes.
And were you there as a student, like advocate for the student in that space?
Yeah, I was just kind of like an observer.
Okay. So there's no one good answer. I'm just gonna say that because half of it, to me, when I hear like lack of resources, it's just where's the money coming from, and that's district decisions, that's state decisions, that's union involvement too. Teachers unions can be more involved in thinking about student access to resources. That's something that I'm passionate about. But a lot of, I think, the in-person advocacy at those IEP meetings, having a community advocate with you, especially if you're a parent or student that feels that your voice isn't being heard, that you feel like you've continually asked for something that's not being provided to you, even if it feels like this should be a legal right that this should be provided to you. There are organizations that are trying to fill that gap, like the Disability Rights Center. Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to think. Through like legal aid and everything, but there's a lot of nonprofits that are really trying to embed themselves within school communities, going to those IEP meetings, making sure that there is actual oversight in what the school is providing, because a lot of things can get brushed under the rug, and especially if a student is perceived to not have a strong support network, that child and that family is often taken advantage of for getting less resources. It's just what's happening. Through principals, sometimes teachers. Not everybody is ill-intentioned, but money is money. And sometimes if there's a less engaged family or less engaged student or whatever it looks like to the school or the district, that child, it's just less likely to get what they need. So sometimes that looks like getting a community advocate. So that can be, there are people, like one of my closest colleagues, Kulia Pringle, if anybody knows who that person is, she's everywhere around the Capitol, and she's in probably all the coalitions that you know about happening around here. That's what she does. She goes as a parent advocate and as a student advocate in IEP meetings is like her primary job that she's created for herself. And we need more people like that, even just as volunteers. Like, hey, do you want just an extra hand to hold while you're trying to talk to the principal about the things that you need for the student? When we're talking about community, Amber, when we're talking about assets, part of it is just making connections with people that care about kids, like what we were talking about, and connecting to advocacy individuals that are interested in doing this work regularly, or if there's a parent group at your school that is interested in doing any kind of assistance with IEPs or with special education services in general. That's really important. Always connect with the social workers, connect with the counselors. Unfortunately, we have a lot of schools that don't have high capacity for either of those things. Like we have some schools, right, that don't have either of those positions filled, that we have special education teachers and we have teachers. Oh, and we're at time and I'll stop talking. But there you go.
Okay, sorry, y'all. That went fast. Hopefully it went fast for you too. Do want to give a couple minutes for questions. I did, before we do that though, want to say, We do have a table out here if you want to learn more about our project and what we're doing in the Twin Cities. We're also interviewing folks who want to be school social workers or teachers as part of our project. And we have some asset mapping sessions coming up in both St. Paul and Minneapolis. So please check out our table. And I know you have a burning question, so I want to get to yours for sure. And then, okay.
Well, I guess what I want to say is that I brought Dr. Umar Johnson, who I know you have all heard of, who is notorious, talked to town several times. And I haven't heard anybody talk about what are the reasons why these kids even end up going to prison. What are these variables? What are these factors, okay? And so when you look at the data and you look at the research, and of course, it's an interest of mine because, you know, it's my community that's affected by this. We're the ones that are sitting in prison more than any other ethnic group, okay? And then now our children are being targeted, okay? So I don't even feel like you got a great representative panel to discuss that part right here in your group, because why are these kids ending up, you know, being treated this way for not taking a hat off, for not doing something minor that the teacher taught them in the classroom? Now, I don't understand at all why we even need an SRO in a school, okay? Because, you know, I think these violent interrupters would do a better job than that SRO. So there are better solutions. So why are kids feeling hopeless, non-caring? Because of what they're experiencing in school. Right now, there is more black families taking their kids out of public school, okay? Doing homeschooling and putting together home community schooling, and their kids are being more successful. They're getting scholarships to go to college. They're leading off to better paths. So there's something going on in the school with who's teaching them, who's disciplining them, writing them up, getting them to the point where they're going to the prisons. So I don't know what all this conversation is about in theory or whatever, but I wish as all of you as educators, learners, workers in social work or whatever you do, to look more closely at the issue. Because maybe it's not your kid, okay? But it's our kids that are having this. So I just wanted to bring that out there.
How you doing? My name is Adonaiah, and what you're looking at is you're looking at one of those kids that went to prison. I did 24 years here in Minnesota prisons. But since then, I've grown. I've freed myself with the help of my community. You really can't see this right now, but what you're looking at is a logic model that we created. And it breaks down exactly what happens in schools and how these kids are led to prison. My mentor created this model. His name is Brother Shane Price and Dr. Verna Price. I work with them and I work with students in these schools. We are right now in 17 schools across Minneapolis and St. Paul and St. Cloud. We go into the schools and we see what is being taught to the kids, but more so we see the children's behaviors, and that is what we address. We address the behaviors by trying to bring the kids into a safe space where they can voice what they are feeling, so they can voice what they are thinking, so they can express what they are going through. And through that is how we create a curriculum to help them to understand who they are, why they are, and what they can become. We have to figure out a way to start listening to these students and stop trying to just browbeat them and tell them what they need to do and what they need to know, because we can learn a lot from them. I'm in this space now. And I love being in this space. And it's not because I want accolades or nothing like that. No, I'd rather sit in the background and not be seen or heard. But I would love for the students that I train, that I mentor, to be standing here talking to you right now. We really need to get to the grassroots. And I also think that a key element, what you're saying was right on point, ma'am. I don't know your name. Excuse me? Michelle. Our students come to schools from homes. So I think also we need to address homes. So we need to bring these parents into this. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, please. I missed this person out.
Thank you so much. My name is Sibai. I also go by Sun, and I am a community educator. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'll tell a personal story real quick and then where I would do. So I was a K-12 ESL teacher. And in 3rd grade, when I was teaching, I knew I had to make a choice, which was what broke my heart, was that test. That test, when I'm talking about the 3rd grade test, the reading test, where they started separating oil and water. And I was like, oh, no. And I knew from that moment that I couldn't do that. But what I could do is quality career education. Because when we're constantly talking to students about what they want to do, we're missing the line as what is quality career education. If a career counselor is talking to a student and they're just a number on the list, how are you going to actually get to know the student of what they want to do? So essentially what I'm passionate about this because we actually work in reentry, okay? Yes. So I'm a reentry, we're in reentry, we're working with folks in Shakopee and different places. What grinds my gears right now is the highest appointed person in this land has done more than any of the students that I've worked with, and they are not able to be that social worker that they want to be, that I try to work with them because of their education status and because they don't have the money to pay for an MSW degree at the University of Minnesota. I'm confused. I'm really confused. So the reason why I am in this particular location as an advocate is quality career counseling is what really we need to work on. Personally, if you know what a student wants to do and you're working with them, do you know what the what the requirements of the job are? Teach the skills, hands-on learning. So essentially, that's what I'm really glad that you spoke about this because I have worked with gentlemen that have been in the prison for 34 years, and they're like, all I want to do is be an accountant. And I was like, I got you. We'll figure it out. But because of the way that things are set up in this country, it doesn't make any sense. And so why does the hopelessness exist? Because of that. How is a quality career counselor, how can I provide hope for someone if I know that the person might not get in? Because the bias that our HR managers have, we talk about that? On the resume, I could write countless resumes, 40, 50 times over, and still the person won't get an interview? Come on. And they're part of the K-12 system. So essentially, I'm really glad that I'm in this room and I'm listening to what's going on here because it's just like this hamster wheel spinning, and I'm very proud to be in this room of educators that are tired of hamster wheels and doing something about it. So thank you, and peace to all of y'all.
Hi, my name is Lamar Green. Sorry about that. My name is Lamar Green. I'm just as impacted too. The questions I had was like, why aren't we talking about how to fund a lot of nonprofit organizations that work with these children to get them where they need to be? I'm a 50-year older. So when I was a kid, I had programs where I could walk into like the boys club, or I could go to a nonprofit that a family member had and get all of the nourishment that I needed, including food and clothes and things that I didn't have. I think all of that was snatched out the community, and how do we get it back?
All right, thanks everybody. We are way over time, and I want to make sure you all eat. So I'd love to have a discussion with any of y'all. Come find me, and we can talk more. Thank you.
All right, thank you all for attending. The last thing I will say is please provide feedback for this session. You'll find the QR codes on your table, or we have many extra up here, and you can take one with you and just keep it with you for the rest of the conference. Thank you so much.